This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try it for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. We are under 3 weeks away from Cavs preseason basketball. It is just around the corner. I can feel it. They're going to take on the Chicago Bulls. It's going to feel like the NBA Finals. I couldn't be more excited. But that's how we're starting the season. Today, we are going to be previewing a team that we might see much, much later in the year. I don't really want to see them, if I'm being honest. I hate playing against this team. But before we get into that, I have to introduce my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm a little sleepy this evening. Stayed up late playing Dungeons and Dragons last night, like most NBA fans often do. So I'm ready. I'm up. I'm wired. I'm not. Well, but that's fine because we're talking about an exciting team that I find very, very interesting this evening.
It's a team that if you are sleepy like Carter, they are going to punch you in the face. And joining us today, senior NBA writer for Orlando Magic Daily, as well as the host on Locked On Magic, Philip Rossman-Reich. Philip, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here, guys. I had a great time in Cleveland 2 years ago, and maybe we'll see each other again down the road. That's definitely a possibility now.
Well, we had a really good time, too, because we attended games 1 and 2 and none other in that series. So those ones were a lot of fun. Things were great. And then, Jared Allen fractures his rib. Things start falling apart.
A gas shortage and a flock of seagulls. That's about it.
Yeah. And, you guys just played like demons at home. And it was just really one of those, series where home court really ended up mattering. But we're not going to dwell on 2 years ago. We're going to look forward because both of these teams, I think, have become substantially better, both from the moves that they have made to add to kind of their cores, as well as the internal growth that we have seen from both of their respective cores. And I want to start things off by asking you, how has your opinion of the Orlando Magic changed since this time last year, heading into last season?
Yeah, I think heading into last season, there was a belief that they were better. And honestly, like I would still say they were a better team last year when healthy than the 2024 season. But there was this like trepidation because it felt like a lot of it was banked on internal improvement. Like, yes, they got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but KCP was meant to be sort of a supporting piece. He was meant to enhance what they already had. And so much of their belief that, hey, we're going to be a home court advantage team, we can win a playoff series, was predicated on a bunch of guys taking steps up. Now, obviously, like, injuries happened last season. You couldn't predict those. Certainly 2 oblique injuries, which never happens in the NBA. And the lack of aggression from the Magic, the lack of especially with their last summer having cap room, the lack of this extreme aggression to make the team better felt like it was a missed opportunity. It just kind of felt like a little bit of a lost season, and injuries do that anyway, but it felt like a lost season even if you account for the injuries. So this summer, the Magic pushed their chips in. Like they are going for it. They believe the window's open. They believe their team is ready. They went out and got a guy in Desmond Bane who feels like is transformative in addressing the team's weaknesses while not compromising the team's strengths. It's a clear upgrade over Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, even forgetting that he had a bad year last year. And it just feels like the Magic now are further on a championship path and are doing the things that they need to do to compete more regularly with the championship level teams in the East.
How much do you feel like Bane materially changes this team's ceiling? Because it does feel like kind of your mileage may vary depending on what you think of Bane as a player. Like, it seems like people are like, feels like people in the community kind of run the gamut between Bane will be as helpful as KCP if KCP actually were good last year, all the way to like he makes them a real contender to win the East. Kind of where are you on the acquisition in terms of how it not just the basketball fit, but how it affects their ceiling?
Yeah, I think Bane is such a different player from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You know, you look back at Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and his time in Denver, like Denver was also kind of a low volume 3-point shooting team anyway. And the Magic were also a low volume 3-point shooting team 2 years ago and a little bit last year. He still averaged only like 4 or 5 3-pointers per game. And so my concern with adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was like, I knew he'd fit in. And generally I thought, obviously he didn't. He shot 34% from 3 for the season. It was one of his worst 3-point shooting seasons since I think 2016. He just wasn't going to shoot enough threes. And my takeaway from, and not to keep bringing up the 2024 series, but my takeaway from that first round series against the Cavs in 2024 was it just felt like Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner were just banging their head against a wall. And they were the only two guys that could really attack off the dribble. They were the only two guys that could really create much of anything. And look, they're good enough that they can put some dents in the wall. Like the drywall was heaving a little bit. There were flakes. The wallpaper was peeling a little bit. They're good enough that they can put some dents in that wall. But if you're trying to win at a higher level, you need to get them some easy shots. Like that was my big takeaway, is like just give Paolo 2 or 3 easy shots, or Franz 2 or 3 easy shots instead of the difficult shots they constantly had to take. And that changes the team. I think the underrated thing about Desmond Bane is that for the last 2 seasons, he's averaged 5 assists per game. And I know Memphis plays a lot faster than Orlando, so maybe he won't average 5 assists per game, but he can run pick and rolls. He can attack off the dribble. He can take over the scoring load when you need him to. And he's going to take 6, 7, 8 threes per game. He's going to have games where he shoots 12 threes and makes 5 or 6 of them. And the Magic just do not have a guy like that. They don't have a guy that is not just a good spot up shooter, but a guy that's going to hunt 3-pointers. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was never that player. And so I think, assuming that there isn't some curse in the water here in Orlando that just prevents people from making threes, Desmond Bane's mindset there might be. I mean, I get one a day.
You sold your soul for the Hito Turkoglu, Rashard Lewis teams.
Honestly, exactly. It might be whatever chest workouts they're doing, because apparently you're tearing obliques and missing threes.
It might be. And so to me, it's just, he gives them a constant 3-point weapon, a constant 3-point threat, which they don't have. There's like 3-point unpredictability. He's, you guys know this with the 3-point shooters you guys have. Donovan Mitchell's going to pull up for 3, and you got to worry about him doing that. The Magic didn't have a guy like that last year. Jalen Suggs does it a little bit, but Desmond Bane is like elite at that. And that, I think, changes the offense pretty significantly, in addition to giving Paolo and Franz a little bit more space, because now there's a 40% 3-point shooter that you really got to worry about, who's not afraid to shoot.
I find this move really fascinating, and it ties into something that Carter and I have talked about, where, teams, you can only really build around the best players that are available to you, right? So obviously Paolo and Franz, there's some overlap in terms of their skill sets, but I think there's a belief that there's a way that they can reach a very high level together, right? That they're not taking away from one another. And, for the Cavs, the star that was available to them was Donovan Mitchell, right? They were able to push their chips in and get Donovan Mitchell, even though, you do have a smaller backcourt and there's fewer, it's harder to build around a smaller backcourt, and you got these 2 7-footers, so you're a bit untraditional with your build. With the Orlando Magic, I was always assuming that they were going to go in for a point guard that can be a real table setter, right? Like, are they going to go after like a Trae Young type or something along those lines? And the Desmond Bane addition is so interesting to me. One, I think it's brilliant because you got rid of, it's not like you gave up a lot of picks, but you weren't giving up in terms of players, right? You're basically getting off 2 of your 3 worst contracts probably, right? And even though Desmond Bane isn't that traditional table setter, he is someone, as you said, that can provide a lot of playmaking. Our analysis of this trade, kind of as it went down, was, this makes sense if you believe that Paolo and or Franz can be that primary initiator. Do you feel like that's a fair characterization, that they're really banking on, that even though Bane's going to get them easy shots, they're going to return the favor? They're going to be the ones that are kind of stirring the drink here.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I think that's a completely fair analysis of the situation. If you think about, the way I think about things is to be a championship team, you've got to do something that's unique. You got to have a player, you got to have a style, a system that forces the other team to do something that makes them uncomfortable. And Orlando's kind of whole philosophy is we've got 2 6'10" guards. We got Paolo and Franz who are tall and can play like guards and can get into post and play like bigs. They can play their position and play multiple positions. This versatility kick is a real thing. And so I think that when the Magic were looking at the landscape, they were looking for a player who can help set the table, relieve some of the ball handling duties, but they didn't want a Trae Young because Trae Young needs the ball in his hands. Maybe he needs to understand, and I think he's understanding this a little bit better. To be successful, he needs to lower his usage rate and not be so ball dominant. But you look at this Orlando team, they don't have the shooting necessarily to take Trae Young off, to have Trae Young on the ball and maximize him as much. If you put Paolo and Franz off the ball, like Franz has really struggled from 3 the last 2 years. Paolo is an improving 3-point shooter. I think he's been a lot better than people give him credit for, but he's not a great 3-point shooter. He's not a knockdown 3-point shooter. And so the Magic want them on the ball. They want them making those primary decisions. They want them kind of in control of things. They just need to relieve the pressure a little bit because they had to do too much. And so now you add in another guy who can attack in a pick and roll, who can, you can run a pick and roll with Bane and Paolo and maybe create a mismatch that you like. He can attack off of secondary breaks or off of kickouts and transition. And I think that's what they were looking for. I've been joking all summer, and I think the point guard thing is probably the big question about the Magic this summer because, the Magic saw last year how valuable Corey Joseph was to them. Like it's strange for a lot of people outside of Orlando to think about. Their season turned around when they started Corey Joseph. They finished the season 12-6 over the last 18 games. I think they had a 113 offensive rating, which doesn't sound good, but when you're averaging 110, 111, that 2-point bump is pretty big. And when Corey Joseph was on the floor with Paolo and Franz, I think the offensive rating was 116, which is pretty decent. That's regular season, not playoffs. Playoffs was a different story. Having just even a stable veteran point guard was really, really valuable. But the Magic are going into this season, I've been joking, they've been going into the season kind of moneyballing the point guard position. They don't have a natural point guard, but they can create one in the aggregate between Paolo, Franz, Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bane. They got 4 guys that can average 5 assists per game if they really need them to. And so it'll be interesting to see if they can survive without the intangibles of someone who kind of knows how to set the table, or if it's just, Paolo and Franz are still really young. They're, 23, 24 years old. Let them make mistakes. They'll be better and we'll be contending for years to come.
I do want to ask about that kind of point guard in the aggregate, basically by necessity, roster construction plan as of now, which is basically like, to distill it simply, you can't have a pure table setting point guard because you don't trust your 2 best players enough to spend a higher percentage of their time off ball as currently constructed, which is an important disclaimer for anyone, any 2 players as young as Franz and Paolo are. But what do you think the ceiling offensively for the team can be in that construct? I remember a couple years ago, Justin and I were having these conversations kind of in the nascent, double big era of especially with the Cavs being such a defensive team under JB Bickerstaff, which boy, does that sound familiar with Jamal Mosley and this big physical Orlando Magic team. But we were having these kinds of discussions about, hey, what is the best offensive rating a team playing 2 non-shooters at the 4 and 5 can have, and I do kind of want to ask you the same question, which is what is the ceiling that you think, in terms of offensive rating ranking within the league that you think they can get to within this current construction?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair and difficult question. First off, I don't know what a good offense looks like. It's been so long. The Magic, as everyone knows, have been bottom 10 in offensive rating every year since 2012. So it's been a while. I do think that this team is capable of being league average or just below league average. Freezing cold, take me later. They're getting out of the bottom 10 this year. It's going to happen. It's going to happen eventually. It has happened before. It will happen again. I think the aim is to be league average. That's not the aim, but I think that's probably where they'll settle around kind of the median of the league. But a lot of it, I think, depends on, we don't know yet how Desmond Bain shooting frees things up for Paolo and Franz. We don't know if their lives just become so immeasurably easier. I'm sure we'll talk about him, but I'm very, very bullish on Jalen Suggs also being an excellent floor spacer for this team. If you look back, only 5-game sample size, but he shot like 42% on catch and shoot threes on like 6-7 attempts per game over the first 5 games of the season before Paolo Banchero's injury last year. And if you go back to the 2024 season, he shot 39% on catch and shoot threes. So I think there's something there with Jalen Suggs. And so putting him in a role where he doesn't have to drive as much, he's not as much of an on-ball threat. He can be a catch and shoot 3-and-D guy that can also attack closeouts and get out in transition. So I think there's something there. We'll find out. We don't really know. I think the point guard stuff is going to be less of a problem in the regular season and more of a problem in the playoffs. Because as we all know, the regular season's not the playoffs. The playoffs are their own different animal. And I feel like that's where we're going to find out if this experiment really works or not, or whether this is something that the Magic actually do need to address. Having someone who can kind of settle the team down in key spots, organize them, get them in the right spots, get them to the right shot, put the ball in the hands of the right player in the right spot at the right time, with the right pass, the right angles, the right spin, the right bounce, all that stuff. That's stuff that's just, you can't measure that stuff. You either know how to do it or you don't. And, the Tyus Jones signing is going to help, but he's coming off the bench and you don't want him starting because of his defensive deficiencies. It's going to be something that I think pops up in the playoffs, and how the Magic are able to solve and respond to that in those pressure games is ultimately going to determine whether this experiment works or not.
It's really fascinating because there are definitely some parallels there. And, the most immediate one is from the Cavs standpoint, we've talked about it for years that you can win with a small backcourt, but in order to do so in the playoffs, you have to have that front court initiator. You have to have someone that's going to be able to alleviate the pressure that they're going to feel when teams throw, walls of guys at them, full court pressure, when they trap, do things to get the ball out of their hands. You need to have that guy. The only examples of smaller backcourt teams with smaller backcourts that won a championship have had that. For us, it's Evan Mobley. For you guys, it's okay. Does one of Paolo or Franz, I guess, really establish themselves as, hey, I can be the hub of a successful offense and everything's going to flow off from there? Because I think Paolo is a talented playmaker. I think Franz is a talented playmaker. Jalen Suggs, I like as a secondary playmaker. Desmond Bain can initiate some offense and is a nice secondary playmaker as well. If you have kind of that, even someone like Wendell Carter Jr. is a nice passer for a big man, right? You have all of these secondary playmakers that are just looking for that one guy that's going to get the defense consistently in rotation. And I find that really, really interesting. There are those parallels between these teams where it's, all right, does this kind of, our unique front court result in offense that can help us win in the playoffs?
Well, it's funny. I also wanted to jump in and say, yeah, there's parallels with the Cavs. There's also some parallels with the Celtics that we just talked about.
Playmaking
in terms of that playmaking in the aggregate, which is like one of the reasons before the Celtics won a title that we all kind of were like, okay, it was like, where's the point guard? And by the way, when the Celtics play poorly, it's still where's the point guard? When they get into their their step back and chucking mode, that's
why they blow a lot of leads, and it's also why they get a lot of leads.
So, it does feel like there is a road there. How much of it is the maturity and development of Paolo, who is, I think he's got a huge fan in these two Cavs podcasters in terms of really believing in him. But there is a bailout element to Paolo's game. where if you're playing, in a lot of ways, the Cavs are kind of the perfect defense for him because they are the don't mess up, stand, put your hands up, and do your best contest without reaching, fouling, etc. And he does give you the bailout from time to time. How incumbent on Paolo is it to make this an offense that is successful?
I mean, I think for any team, your star playing well matters, and your star advancing and continue to improve matters. And look, Paolo is entering year 4, so it's not like he's been in the league forever. And I think some of the criticisms of Paolo act like he's been around for 10 years and like this is it. He's going to keep getting better. But I think so much of what the Magic are betting on is that Paolo Banchero is an all-NBA player, that he is one of the very best players in the league, or he's going to be one of the very best players in the league. And that means they need him to start making smarter shot decisions. Like you said, like he kind of settles for mid-range jumpers. I think he prefers a kind of more methodical, slower pace. I think the Magic want to see him kind of speed things up. But at the same time, like some of those shots are just like, that's all they have available. Like the shooting was so bad last year that it really got to a point where teams would leave shooters open in the corner and Paolo would take a contested jumper over 2 guys, and we'd all be sitting there. It's just like, that's probably a better shot than kicking it out to the guy in the corner. Like the percentages would probably say it probably is, it isn't a better shot, but the percentages would probably say it's a lot closer, or at least the shooting percentages for that year would say it's a lot closer than they should be. And so the big curiosity is this Magic team just doesn't have spacing. They don't have enough shooting. They don't have enough guys that have gravity, that are a constant threat. And so the question is, if you give Paolo shooting around him, if you give him some spacing, and you give him some guys that defenses have to think twice about leaving open, what does that do to his game? Does that increase his assists? Does that increase his efficiency because he's taking better shots? Defenses are playing him one-on-one more. What does that do for him? I would argue Paolo made a pretty sizable leap last year. It's kind of hidden in his numbers because he had a month returning from the oblique injury that was just bad, just plain bad. He was not good enough in January, February before the All-Star break. After the All-Star break, and this is 24 of the 50 some odd games that he played, after the All-Star break, he averaged 29 points per game. He shot 33% from 3, had a 58.1% true shooting percentage. He made a pretty big leap last year in that efficiency. And it's, again, a big reason why the Magic rallied to make the playoffs and win the division and do all these small things that, this team isn't going to celebrate anymore. But last year, it was a huge accomplishment for where they were at. If he's able to cement that leap and take advantage of the spacing, that's the kind of leap the Magic need to see him make. Just an overall efficiency. Everyone's been comparing him to Cade Cunningham in the leap that he made last year when he got Malik Beasley and got Tim Hardaway Jr. And, JB came in and they had a serious coach for the first time in his career. That's the kind of leap people are expecting from Paolo. And, I think he's made a bigger leap than a lot of the national media thinks he has. They're just looking at his full season numbers, and look, they're not. His full season numbers were still career numbers. They just weren't a huge step forward. But if you throw out what he did, or you throw out that month after his injury, he made the kind of leap that I think everyone expects from a number 1 pick and a guy like him. So everything at the end of the day, you go as far as your stars will take you. And I think what the Magic did this summer was more about trying to figure out, how do we maximize what we have in Paolo? We believe in Paolo. They gave him the max contract. They gave him the player option on the 5th year. They are fully invested in Paolo Banchero. How do we maximize him and give him the tools he needs to be his best?
Yeah, I think we can relate there because I last season, not this past season, but the one prior, we said the same thing about Evan Mobley, where he came back from his surgery, and because he was on a minutes restriction, it kind of kept those box score numbers down. And we're sitting there saying, no, this isn't a stagnation. Like, he's very clearly taking a step forward. If you just kind of look at the per 36, this is a big jump in terms of how productive he is when he's out there. And I agree with you. I remember Carter and I saw, if it wasn't his first or second game, it was the first 5 games that Paolo played. We got to see him live. And I remember we just kind of turned to each other and we were like, oh, he's going to be a top 10 player. Like, he's just got that like body type. He seems like the prototypical NBA star that, you know, if he puts it all together, if the decision making gets to that higher level, there isn't really a ceiling for him. And he's someone that when you have a team that has talented secondary playmakers, that has a lot of talent around him, he's someone that if he makes that leap, as you said, it's going to put everybody in a better context where they can do their best work, just like Zoom AI Companion does for us. Only you can do your best work. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion. I had to get it in.
I want to ask.
Nice transition. That was well done. Well done.
I want to ask you about Jamal Mosley. Feels like a pretty big year for him as coach. You know, it's again going back to the parallels of kind of the Magic. Just feel like they're like a year and a half behind the Cavs on the same timetable. And I'm sure as a Magic fan, you're hoping to be on that same trajectory, given a 64 win team in Cleveland this last year. And you know, when the Cavs had their first round series loss to the Knicks a year prior to the Magic's first round series loss, the immediate kind of thing, the kind of interpretation from the front office was, well, man, do we need shooters? So they go get Max Strus, they go get George Niang, they start changing their offensive profile, get the 3-point rate up and all that stuff. And then by the next year, it was I kind of felt like the entire Cavs community was looking at JB and was like, all right, we got you some toys. Is the offense going to take that leap that we want to see? And it didn't. So even though the Cavs made it to the second round and conceivably pushed their team forward to a new level they hadn't been to before, JB, they moved on. Do you kind of feel the same pressure with Jamal this year?
I think so. You know, I don't know if it's like, hey, you don't win a playoff series, you're out. Like, I think the context will matter and how things develop matters. I think part of why JB was kind of on the hot seat was that he struggled with an Orlando team that was not, was a newbie. You know, they allowed Orlando to get confidence in that series, and it wasn't I don't know if they thought that would be an easy series, but it became dicey. Like I remember I was at Game 7, hearing Rocket Arena booing JB Bickerstaff in that timeout in the first half when Orlando was up by 17. Like it was really bad. I do think that management did its job. Management went out and got the toys. I think Jeff Weltman was the one under pressure to make the most of this period with Paolo Banchero because, Jeff Weltman would say this all the time. The salary cap comes for everybody. They knew that they had their last shot at cap room the summer before, and they didn't take advantage of it as much as they could have. And this summer was kind of their last summer to kind of play around with the cap sheet a little bit before the Franz contract set in, before the Paolo contract set in. The books get a lot clunkier. Their kind of reign of free money was over. And Jeff Weltman delivered. Everybody, we'll see how it works out, but everyone universally believes that Desmond Bane was a huge, huge win for management. So now the attention turns to the coach to take advantage of all those, like you said, to take advantage of all the toys. We got you the toys. Now you got to play with them and deliver something for us. I think that, look, Jamal Mosley did a heck of a job coaching this team last year. With all the injuries they had, with everything that happened, that they stuck together, that they rallied at the end of the season. A big sign is, are you better as the season progresses? Are you playing your best at the end of the season? The fact that the Magic were able to kind of, that 40-point loss to Cleveland during that homestand in February was like the low point of the season. They just lost Jalen Suggs for the year. That happened literally. The injury happened literally right before that game, in a workout right before that game. That was the low point of the season, and things could have very easily unraveled to the point that they would have been in the 9-10 play-in series. That was a realistic thing, and somehow, Jamal, and I give him a lot of credit, got that team to stay bought in, to believe, and to finish that season strong, to get to the 7 seed, win the division, get to 500. It's a small thing, but there's a bit of pride at being 41-41, at getting to 500.
When you have a season from hell, which I think the
Yeah.
Magic had. It's I always like to say that like a team's culture isn't demonstrated when things are going well. It's demonstrated when everything's falling apart around you. And it's like, what are you gonna show? And like, I think that's what I've always been the most impressed with this Magic team, and frankly, a little jealous, if I'm honest, in the sense that whether things are optimal or not, the Magic have a way of dragging everyone down with them into their style. It's gonna be a fight. People are gonna hurt after the games and put on that extra ice pack. They're going to play Orlando Magic basketball, and sometimes, to your point, their head does not bust through the drywall when they're slamming it up against it, but like the drywall is damaged at the end, and like
I think it was a big part of Boston losing the next round. Honestly,
I think it was too.
And so I guess what I'd love to ask is like, why do you think that is? Why is, even in a season from hell, their style so indomitable where they're dragging the defending NBA champions down into their style?
I think a lot of it is just trust. Like, they're so, everyone is always so focused on all the changes around the league. And this Magic team has essentially been the same for 4 seasons. Like, they obviously drafted Paolo Banchero. They added players here and there, but this team had essentially been together for 4 years since Jamal Mosley was with the team. And there is just this unwavering belief. Like, you kind of knew something was up. Paolo's rookie year, they started 5-20. They were really struggling. Like they had some injuries at that time too. They were really, really struggling. And you kind of wondered like, Paolo's putting up great numbers, which is fantastic, number 1 pick. But what is this going to translate into? What is this team? And I think they finished that season 27-28.
Yeah.
And it almost felt like, this is a 500 basketball team. Like, they were, I think, 10th in the league in defensive rating during that 27-28 run. And the offense was still a problem. They still were relying on a lot of rookies, but they were winning games. They were the last team eliminated from play-in contention that didn't make the play-in tournament. And it was just like, oh no, like that was a moment. And like, I've been through so many rebuilds in Orlando and seen coaches fail. And that was a moment when it was like, that's when a coach loses a locker room and loses belief. And, things start to split apart and rebuilds get really, really nasty. And he is just so good at relating to players and being on their side and getting them to buy into the whole team concept and being in their corner, that everyone just runs through a wall for him. And like, that's half the battle, obviously, is just having this buy-in and commitment. And the Magic have had this full buy-in and commitment at seemingly every turn, at every point of adversity. They haven't wavered. Now, have they had the talent? Have they had the offensive ability to take advantage of that all the time? No. And that's going to be the challenge for Jamal Mosley now, is the vibes aren't good enough. Like, it's not good enough just to have good vibes and everybody loves each other. Now you're trying to win, and you're not just trying to win, you're trying to win big. And it's little things, it's tactical things, it's the right substitution. It's all these little things. I've always been impressed with Jamal Mosley he always has the big picture in mind. Like, they were 5-20 and he was telling everybody, we're doing the right things. Believe in it, trust it. I'm going to work with you to get there. And they got there. But now it's about not just the big picture things. It's about, we need to win this game to get the 4 seed, to get the 3 seed, to get the 2 seed. We need to win this game 5 to win the series. And I got to be able to think a little bit outside the box sometimes, like Cleveland did in that series with Tristan Thompson in 2024, to get us over the finish line and make sure we win. And you're going to win or lose on my decisions. And that's the pressure we don't know if Jamal Mosley can handle. I argue this with people all the time. Like players, I think coaches have roles too. And some coaches are really strong at that culture building beginning stage. I think you would say JB Bickerstaff is really good at that culture buy-in stage. Jamal Mosley is excellent at that culture buy-in stage. The Magic had Steve Clifford for a while. Steve Clifford was excellent at getting teams to just get to the playoffs, just be good enough and disciplined enough to get to the playoffs. He could never win a first round series. His teams just weren't good enough. He wrung everything he could out of the team just to get in and have them prepared, and just couldn't get over the hump. Maybe some of it is he never had the team to get over the hump. The question, I think, facing Jamal Mosley is whether he's a coach that can take his team to the next round, to the round after that, can compete with the top coaches in the league tactically to get to the finals, to win a playoff series. And I think he's had good playoff showings, but in his first 2 playoff showings, I think he made some mistakes in games 1 and 2 against Cleveland. Thought he had a great game plan against Boston, and Boston was just a significantly better team at the end of the day. And so I think he's capable, but like so many other things, you just don't know till you get there.
Yeah, you got to find out, can they grow with the team, right? Like, I think just as, coaches may have a role, as you stated, they're not, a static commodity, right? Like they can grow, they can have good games, they can have bad games, they can regress some years. It's hard to say definitively, right? Like, and I think too often we speak definitively when it comes to coaches. And, it's funny, like, you mentioned how last year Orlando was really banking on internal growth, right? To take that kind of next step forward. And the Cavs, went a step even further, right? Like you were doing that, bringing in KCP. We were bringing back the entire team, right? Like it really was just kind of the coaching change. And even Kenny Atkinson said, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're taking a lot of the stuff that was already here. It was just, that attention to detail, that how we're going to prioritize things, how we're going to approach the regular season, just, methods to kind of get that buy-in. And I asked you at the start of the podcast how your opinion of the Magic evolved over the last year. I'd like to get kind of an outsider's perspective of how your opinion of the Cavs changed from basically this time last year, coming off a disappointing season, their kind of season from hell, when they took a step back and lost in the second round at Boston, to being a 64-win team, but ultimately coming up short and being injured again in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think any of us saw Cleveland taking the leap that they took last year, and I think a lot of that came from just renewed energy, renewed confidence. Like winning the playoff series helped them, and I think obviously Evan Mobley becoming the player that he did. I did not see Evan Mobley becoming such an impact player as he did. And I think Kenny Atkinson brought a guy who's been deep in the playoffs to the table. A guy who kind of knows we have to be able to trust everybody. We have to be able to use everybody on our roster to get where we want to go. And because one of the problems of having a small backcourt is we got to make sure we get there. We got to make sure our guys get there. And I think they had a great regular season plan. And I think they, obviously they tore through the league, and they were a team everybody was afraid of because they had the Cavalanches. Like there was a real thing that happened. I don't know. I don't know. Like they stormed through Miami, but I honestly don't know why they ultimately failed in the playoffs, why they lost to Indiana in that second round. Was it just Indiana was the worst matchup, a team that kind of has the guards that can kind of keep up with Cleveland? Was it 3-point luck? Maybe. I think that's a big thing, injury. I think Cleveland had some injuries in that second round series, if I'm not mistaken. Like they were still dealing with some stuff.
Yeah, Darius Garland with the turf toe, missed game 1 and 2 and could barely kind of stand the rest of the series. Evan Mobley had the high ankle sprain in game 1. Actually, that's probably one that doesn't get talked about enough because they had kind of taken control of that game 1 in the fourth quarter. And then DeAndre Hunter breaks his thumb on his shooting hand on what I believe to be a poor call. Evan Mobley gets a high ankle sprain and is all of a sudden getting beat down the court by Pascal Siakam. And then he's out for game 2, right? And then Donovan Mitchell in game 2 gets a calf strain. Like it was just compounding. Yeah. But like Carter and I personally, what we felt is I think if they were fully healthy, they would have won that series because the talent would have just overcome all of that stuff. I think the injuries leveled the playing field. And Indy, I think they got better and they gained more confidence as the playoffs kind of went on. But I think it brought it to a level where some of the Cavs' bad habits would come through, where, they would stop involving Evan Mobley or the bigs, right? Like in game 2 with no Mobley or Garland, Jared Allen had like I think he had like 24 and 16 or something like that on 7 of 9 shooting. But when everyone's gassed in the second half, he's not getting any touches because, you know, the ball is just too sticky, right?
Yeah.
So I think it brought out some of those bad habits that would have bit them later in the playoffs. That's firmly my belief on here. But like even if you just want to say injuries, I think that has been now a story for 2 years in a row where, you know, Donovan Mitchell recurring calf issues on his left leg. Darius Garland last year, it was, you know, the jaw, you know, freak kind of jaw situation. But again, this year was a freak thing where, you know, he landed weird in the fourth quarter against Miami and basically wasn't himself again, right? So that durability is certainly a big question for this team going into next year.
Yeah, and that was my impression, was that like they essentially lost to Indiana not only because I want to give Indiana their credit, but
yeah, of course,
injuries were just such a huge factor for them. It was a huge factor for them in 2024 against the Celtics because, like, you know, they suffered. I think Donovan missed a lot of games, and Darius had to kind of step up in that series.
And Jarrett didn't play because he
took an elbow from
Magic.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about in a bit. Here I assume. You know, but. Yeah, you can't control for injuries. Like I tell people this all the time. Like, yes, there are players who are maybe more durable than others, but for the most part, injuries are just random. Like stuff happens as long as it's not some like recurring thing. Like it's you know that this guy has a bad knee and he had a bad knee at that big moment. Well, okay, you got to wonder if he can make it through 82 plus. But sometimes just random things happen, and like. Indiana experienced that 2 years ago in the conference finals against Boston, I think. Yeah. Getting to the finish line is just as difficult, and no matter how much you plan for it, there's not much you can do. And so I think I give Cleveland a lot of credit. They did not. I think they understood and continue to resist doing anything big, knowing that their basic formula works. But they didn't sit still either, and they made sure that they improved their roster in some significant ways. And I really like what Cleveland did this offseason to better position themselves.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it all pays out. You know, obviously Max Strus is going to miss some significant time to start the season, but that's going to probably force their hand into DeAndre Hunter starting, which was something that we really want to see.
And the other thing is too, I think we see kind of in the lifespan of contending teams. That first year that you're really contending, you go for it. You go for 60 plus wins. You kind of maximize your win total. They've done that. Is Cleveland going to fight for the 1 seed or make sure they're healthy and accept the 2 seed? Like I think now that they'll still win plenty of games. They should still be the 1 seed. I'm not sitting here saying don't go for the 1 seed, but like. If they feel like they need to give Dom a game or give Darius a game or give Evan a game, and it means they win 59 games instead of 60, so what? What matters now is April, May, and June. And if you can get guys off their feet or they're feeling a little sore that day and you need to give them that day, give them that day. It's not going to hurt you in the long run, especially in this Eastern Conference.
I want to ask you kind of the same question, which is how much do you care about seeding as someone, you know, and how much do the Magic care about seeding? You know, because it, depending on your taste and your belief in the respective teams, like you either really, really don't want any part of Cleveland because you think New York is a step below, or Cleveland's playoff flameouts have been bad enough that you go, I'd maybe rather play New York. Do you care who the Magic would play when it comes down to it?
I don't think I necessarily care about like that second round matchup. I don't think the Magic are in a position to say like, oh, we're the 3 or the 4. Well, we'd rather play Cleveland in the second round. We know them pretty well. New York got us a few times. Like I'm not going to play that game. I will say this. I care about seeding in so much as the Magic should expect to have home court advantage in the first round. And you know, we saw in 2024 how big that was, getting that and having that easier path out of the first round. And, you know, I'm not necessarily believing that like the first round is some pushover, that there's just like 3, maybe 4, like clear cut better teams. Like I don't want to face Giannis in a first round playoff series in a 3-6. I don't want to potentially face Joel Embiid in a 2-7. Like you still expect to win those series.
Even Trey and the Hawks, right? They can be dangerous.
Trey and the Hawks. If you're the 4 and Trey and the Hawks are the 5, that's not going to be fun. It'll be fun for fans.
55-45 kind of flip, potentially by just how hot they get from 3, right? Exactly.
And the Magic typically defend Trey pretty well. Like we don't know what this new Hawks team looks like. I want to make that
Suggs is incredible. We haven't talked about him much, but that dude is an incredible defender.
Yeah. And like the way the Magic put Trey in like kind of boxes and corners, they do a good job like kind of corralling. No one can stop him completely, but we all saw the play-in tournament game. Like maybe you didn't. All the Magic fans watched it. Like they did a really good job. And in a game where Paolo and Franz did not play particularly well, they did a really good job kind of keeping the Hawks in check and really bugging them defensively. Now, different team now. They got Porzingis, they got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they got some more shooters. They added some shooting. It's going to be interesting to see how they match up, and Atlanta's going to be pretty good, I think, too. But I think the main goal for the Magic as far as seeding goes is just, make sure you have home court advantage. Like that was the rallying cry before last season after, they lost every road game in a 7-game series to the Cavs, was they were determined to get home court advantage. That's no longer the goal. That's the expectation. Like this team should be a top 4 team in the East. And I think they'll be pretty disappointed if they have to start game 1 on the road.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like it's funny hearing you talk about this because I actually care about seeding more because I don't want to play you guys earlier than we have to. Like if we're going to play the Orlando Magic, I want it to be the Eastern Conference Finals because I saw the physical toll that playing against you guys took, right? Like I'm not one of those Cavs fans that believed, that Jarrett's ribs were targeted kind of, throughout those kind of games or whatnot. But like, I saw what you guys did to Boston. And yes, Jaylen Brown torn meniscus and, Porzingis couldn't breathe and all those qualifiers. You guys dictate the terms of engagement at just such a high level. And it takes such a large amount of physicality to beat Orlando that it's going to leave a toll. Like I don't want to go up against the Knicks after playing Orlando. And I'm curious, both of these teams have changed a lot since their matchup 2 years ago. But I want to get your perspective on when you look at a potential matchup against the Cavs, where is it that you feel Orlando has the advantage? Does it simply kind of come down to kind of that physicality, or are there some other areas that you kind of have in mind that, yeah, maybe, the Cavs are going to win more games in the regular season and they're going to be able to exploit some stuff against us, but this is where we feel we have the edge?
Yeah, I think the biggest advantage they have, and it's going to sound strange saying this because of the way Donovan Mitchell played in that series, which he was fantastic in that series, is they just have so many capable defenders and differently capable defenders that they can throw at the guards. I kind of said this going into that series in 2024. The guy that scared me in that series was not Donovan Mitchell. It was Darius Garland. Like Dom's gonna do what Dom's gonna do. Like he's gonna get his, and it may be inefficient, but he's gonna get his. When Darius Garland got going, and if you go back and look at that series, like a lot of the games that Cleveland won were the games that Darius got going. And so I expected them to put Jalen Suggs on Darius Garland and say, like, you're locking him out. Gary Harris is just going to make life difficult for Donovan Mitchell, but he's going to get what he's going to get. And like, I think Jalen did a really good job getting under Darius's skin. And the game 4 moment stood out to me immediately. It was like, oh, like this is going to be a series. Like this is Orlando's kind of got them, and Cleveland's kind of reverting back to what they struggled with in that series in 2023. But having said that, Game 5, Darius had that great first half. Yeah, I believe it was that great first half.
It was funny because Game 5, he had the great first 3 quarters and then a disastrous fourth quarter. And then Game 7, he had a disastrous 3 quarters and then a great fourth quarter.
Hit the big threes in the fourth quarter that essentially won the game.
I think he either like scored or assisted on the majority of their fourth quarter baskets.
Yeah, exactly. And so where I see Orlando having the advantage is that, Jalen Suggs can take a turn on Donovan Mitchell. Desmond Bane can take a turn on Donovan Mitchell. I'm a big believer that Franz Wagner is a potential all defensive team player too. Like I think he is so underrated as a defender because everyone's so enamored by his scoring and, focused on his 3-point shooting. He is an excellent and strong defender. The Magic's ability to switch 3 or 4 guys in their starting lineup. Like I don't want Paolo guarding Mitchell too much, but they have 3 guys in their starting lineup that they should feel very comfortable if they need to cross match or they're in transition, should feel very comfortable. Like, oh no, he'll hold his own against them, or he'll not lock up because lock up those players, but he can hold his own against Darius Garland. Like they're going to make it difficult for you. I think that's where Orlando has, a big opportunity. That's where I think their strength is they just have so many physical bodies. And that's not even talking about, Jonathan Isaac off the bench. Anthony Black, who's, was a rookie in that series, is now significantly better, especially on the defensive end. They just have so many guys that they can just throw at you and throw at these guards that are big, that are athletic, that can stay with them and make those shots difficult that, they'll get their licks in, obviously, but by the end of the game, you're starting to feel those heavy legs, and the Magic have been able to switch and rotate guys onto them to stay fresh and be ready to stop them.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what a matchup would look like, right? Because I think back to that matchup 2 years ago, and I think you're right. Like, trying to get the ball out of Darius's hands should be the priority for a lot of teams, because what we've seen kind of in the playoffs, particularly these last 2 years, right? Like 2 years ago, as you said, Darius did have his moments against Orlando, but he was a shell of himself physically, right? Like jaw wired shut. He had lost all the weight. He just wasn't right physically, death in the family, all those kinds of things. But Donovan, when he kind of takes that primary role, it takes away from other guys to some extent. And that's not, a criticism of Donovan. It's what we've kind of talked about this offseason, which is he is exactly who we need him to be in order for the Cavs to win a championship. It's about, can Darius and Evan elevate themselves, particularly in the playoffs? Because then you have a perfectly balanced ecosystem. Darius isn't a good enough scorer to be, that leading focal point if Donovan Mitchell isn't there. Donovan isn't a good enough playmaker to be, that floor general for the entire team if Darius isn't there. As much as there's redundancies in their games, they need to be there together. They need to be, working together. And, Orlando has bodies to throw at them, as you said. The Cavs, I feel like they're better suited to defend Orlando than they were a couple years ago. I just think back to the George Niang on Paolo Banchero minutes. And I think you won those by 45.
Yeah.
It's more interesting now that Larry Nance Jr. is a potential option for the Cavs.
Yeah. And again, I try to remind Magic fans about this all the time too. The Jared Allen injury in that series was humongous. Was a game-changing thing.
I really do think Jarrett might have been the best player through the first 4 games of the series.
He was the most consistent for sure. And it drives me nuts. And any listeners that still do this, I know we've got very, very smart listeners, so I don't think any of them do this. But anyone that still questions his toughness, now after the fact, or acts like that wasn't a good playoff series, is out of their mind. The guy averaged 17 and 14 and was playing through a partially fractured rib until it became just too much, and he got hit again in there.
Yeah. And look, Jamal Mosley, first playoff series, huge mistake putting Jonathan Isaac on him. Jonathan Isaac can play some minutes at center, but not full time, not against a guy like Jared Allen. And when I enter that series, and I think the advantage that Cleveland has is they have the defensive player of the year who's not only a great shot blocker and rim protector, but he can get out on the perimeter. And essentially, I remember going into that series, I was like, the Magic need to attack whoever Evan Mobley's not guarding. Between Paolo and Franz, whoever Evan Mobley's not guarding, and I know there is this narrative that Evan Mobley wasn't defending Paolo well in that series, which wasn't. Evan probably won that battle, but it was close. But Paolo's an all-star, a really good player.
Yeah,
it wasn't like Paolo was dominating that matchup. But Franz specifically has always kind of struggled against Cleveland because of Evan Mobley, because Evan Mobley is such a strong defender. He has the foot speed. Obviously, the block in Game 5 is what everyone will remember. He has the foot speed. He has the ability to stay with him when he's getting downhill. And there're just not many guys bigger than Paolo or Franz that can handle them. And Evan Mobley is like one of maybe 2 or 3 guys in the league that can. And so it creates an interesting matchup issue. Now, like in 2024, that was a problem for the Magic because they didn't have anyone else that could attack. Now we see what they can do because they have Desmond Bane who can pop in 20 when you need him to. We don't know what Jalen Suggs can do quite yet, and he struggled in that first playoff series as well. As much as people talk about Franz's bad Game 7, Jalen was just as bad in Game 7, and that was a big factor in the way that series ended. The Magic have a few more weapons, and that's how they've changed. But Cleveland's still a really tough matchup. Like they both do things that bother the other one, which is what would make it a fascinating series again.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And, I mentioned Larry Nance Jr. having someone like DeAndre Hunter even right now. Now there's 4 of those guys that can, defend on the perimeter, that can defend on the inside. Dean Wade does a really good job. I don't believe he was available for. He was not
available in that series at all. It was a huge deal.
He is a very strong defender that can provide rim protection too, right? Like the Cavs have the option to be a much bigger team this year outside of when they're playing the 2 guards, or at least around the 2 guards. It's about how Kenny Atkinson chooses to deploy them. But I really do think, if I can kind of distill like what these seasons are about for the Cavs and Magic, it's, does our top pick take that leap to become a top 10 player? For us, it's Evan Mobley. But, I think Donovan's always going to be the leading scorer. I think he should be the leading play finisher for the Cavs. I do think that there's a world where Evan Mobley is the best and most impactful player on this team and someone we can rely on come playoffs. And for Orlando, if Paolo takes that leap and is, first or second All-NBA type player, just like the elevation of his traits to that level, at that consistency, is going to open up everything for everybody else. And I'm just really, really fascinated by these teams. I want to know, where do you kind of see Orlando finishing, both kind of from a regular season and postseason standpoint?
Yeah, I try to be like very cautious and realistic. We haven't seen this team play yet, and so It's like we don't know if these pieces work. We all thought Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was going to be great. I had people who watched like training camp and were like, "Oh no, he's going to fit like a glove. He's already been a good leader. He's making every shot." Being
responsible. I'm too big of a homer for this, man. Like, yeah, I know. Fired up at this time of year.
I know. I think the Magic finished third in the East. I think they'll be closer to New York than people think. And I think they get out of the first round. And I think I think they play a competitive second round series. Like, I just don't think it's now that they have some offensive weapons, and I do think the offense can work. I think they'll finish in the top half of the league in offensive rating. I'm not ready to say they'll be top 10, but I think the offense will be good enough. Maybe the defense takes a small step back. They're like 3rd or 4th. They're still going to be a top 5 defense in the league. Mm-hmm. I think that they win a playoff series. I think they're the 3 seed, and I think they push whoever that 2 seed is, pretty hard. And at the end of the day, I think their inexperience still does them in. Like, Paolo and Franz are still very, very young. They've been in 2 playoff series. They know what the playoffs are like. But, I remember Paolo said after the series against Cleveland, he was like, "I don't know how I would be able to do this for 2 more weeks." Like he said after Game 7 that he was so exhausted and just mentally exhausted. He was just like, "I don't know how I would have been able to prepare for Game 1 against Boston, like in a couple of days." Like that's something you have to learn how to do too. Yeah. And so I think that's going to probably do them in a little bit this season, but I think they're going to turn a lot of heads, and they're going to deliver on what a lot of people expect for them to be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference and a player in this East for a few more years now.
For what it's worth, I can't even talk because it's getting late. For what it's worth, I completely agree. I have Orlando as the 3 seed in the regular season. Part of why I had them as the 3 seed is I'm kind of banking that Suggs is going to miss some time. Paolo and Franz are probably going to miss some time. And, Bane's missed some time over the years. Like, if they both miss like 10, 15 games a piece, I think that's going to cost them a little bit. I think I would pick them in a series against the Knicks. I can't think of a team that Karl Anthony Towns would enjoy playing against less than the Orlando Magic. I don't think that the Knicks have enough initiators offensively to go against what Orlando can throw at them defensively. And I just feel like what this Magic team can be if they are like fully actualized is what Tom Thibodeau wanted the Knicks to be a couple years ago, before, you know, they kind of made their splashier moves and whatnot. Just like the super gritty team that everyone hates playing against. And I feel like if they are healthy, I would pick them in a series. I do think that experience piece is so important. I think in how we rush to elevate players, how we rush to elevate teams, and then drag them down too quickly when they have those kind of bumps in the road, I think sometimes we forget how much seasoning is required for teams to actually become champions, and how experienced a lot of the champions ultimately are, right? Like they go through a lot of warts along the way, and it does take a lot of time. It takes continuity. We still need to figure out that Mosley piece. I'm so excited about the individual pieces on Orlando that I think, you know, being the excitable boy that I am, I can get ahead of myself sometimes. And plus, I just want to see the Knicks lose, because who wants to see?
Yeah,
the
who
Knicks
doesn't
win?
like seeing the Knicks lose?
Yeah. Carter, what about you?
I think Orlando is going to finish third here as well. But I said this last year with the Cavs, and a bunch of people rolled their eyes. I will not be stunned if we end the regular season and the Magic are the 1 seed. I just think where the Cavs and Knicks are in their journey as franchises, I don't think they're thinking about it the same way Orlando probably is. And if Orlando has a good luck season, like, I'm not saying it's like, I maybe might put that at like a 20% chance, but like, that's not nothing. That's not like completely out of the, like, I'm just not going to be floored if it happens. I think this is a really awesome team. I picked Cavs in 7 2 years ago because when no one was, by the way, because I really believed in this Orlando team's ability to make life hard for just about anyone they play. I think they're a lot better than they were last year.
Boy, was I gloating when the Cavs were up 2-0 and
oh,
won
yes, you were.
comfortably.
I had Cavs in a hard 6, if I'm not mistaken, in that series.
And I really had a lot of faith in that team, and still do. And as such, I think even though they're a 3 seed, I mean, I'll be stunned if they make the finals. That's where I'm probably not ready to get to just yet. But like, if they do, if everything falls into place, it's not out of the question. No one had that Orlando team with Dwight Howard making the finals. And we have plenty of scar tissue here among Cavs fans with regards to that series. But like,
the whole team should be in jail.
Here's the thing.
Few of them got there.
I know.
At least NBA jail.
If Orlando somehow manages the 1 seed, then they really only got to beat one pretty darn good team in the East to walk their way into the finals, which means that I can't say they can't make the finals, and that is a big compliment from where this Orlando team was 3-4 years ago.
Yeah,
I think we got to see the ball go through the basket a few times
Sure
before
do.
we start talking
You
one
sure
seed
do.
like that. It's been a long time since I've watched a functioning offense on a nightly basis.
That's
Hey,
fair.
you know what? It can turn in a hurry. For us, it was defense, and then we drafted Evan Mobley, and it's like, oh, I guess we're just a top 3 defense every year now. Even as a rookie, we're winning at a 50-win pace when him and Garland were playing. It was when you draft special players, special things can happen. Orlando has no shortage of that, so really excited to see what happens with them next season. Let the people know before we get you out of here. Let the people know where you can find your work, what you got going on. Plug your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Best place to find my written work is at orlandomagicdaily.com. I write there every day right now. We're kind of doing link stuff instead of hard-hitting analysis because we're waiting on data and waiting for the season to start. Not so long from now, 2 weeks till training camp starts. Very, very excited about that. You can find my podcast at Locked On Magic, wherever you download podcasts, on YouTube, wherever. Best place to stay up to date on the daily happenings with the Orlando Magic. Doing my countdown to camp right now, just kind of going over all the players and talking about all the aspects of this team. So if you're really jonesing for some Orlando Magic, that's the best place to go.
And you know what? Getting tongue-tied there, you can blame it on me. It's contagious. Once you hear it happen with
Yep.
me, it just spreads like wildfire.
I choose the alliteration because it's supposed to be easy and pleasant to hear, and it just becomes a tongue twister.
And me, I don't have a plan. And sometimes I just talk through it. Sometimes I run into a roadblock. It is what it is. But we really appreciate you having you coming on. A lot of fun. Glad that we got you on. We got a magic person to talk to. We've talked about this before, that we didn't have kind of our go-to magic podcaster, and I feel like we found him. So thank you so much for coming on.
I hope so. We're relevant again.
There you go. Hey, we went through that too, when all of a sudden people started having us on, and we're like, wow, people want to talk about that.
I know, we're interesting now. It's crazy.
This is sweet. This is really, really great. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone tuning in live on YouTube. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasedown's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of their review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.